We need to educate people about slavery in the North so that they will be able to see the impact of the total picture of slavery.
Historic Hudson Valley has been doing research and public programs for several decades on the history of slavery in the North. They've looked at records in their archives, done research, consulting with historians throughout the United States who know history of slavery.
In undertaking the work of studying slavery in the colonial North and mounting public programs discussing slavery, we've come to understand how sensitive this subject can be, and we welcome the opportunity to engage in dialogue with people about it.
The language that scholars are using and that the general public is learning about on how to talk about the institution of slavery has changed over the years. For instance, when the early scholars of the 20th century were writing about the history of slavery, they referred to enslaved people as slaves. And they were sort of objectified. They weren't treated as human beings, but they happened to be forcibly put into a system that enslaved them. And so one of the terms that we're now using is the term enslaved or enslaved people to recognize their humanity and to recognize the action that was done or taken upon them.
It's very important as you're telling the story of slavery that you emphasize the role of individuals, be they slave owners or enslaved people. And even if you have only a few facts, you can try to build out who those individuals are by thinking about the larger context in which they're operating.
A lot of the primary documents that we're using to tell the story of enslavement in the North are not newly discovered documents. These documents have been around for a number of years. They've been looked at by scholars over different decades. But we're asking different questions of those documents. We are reading those documents from a different angle.
It does mean reading through a lot of documents in order to find those special stories that really can open a window onto this history and can give you a sense of the humanity, the way that people are experiencing these times.
Depending on where a person lived, whether they lived in an urban space or rural space, whether they lived on a farm or plantation, really dictated the experience of slavery. Historic sites like Phillipsburg Manor are very important in teaching and telling the history of slavery to a general public. It's not in a classroom, but it's in the physical site where people were once enslaved who worked to help contribute to our country. It's a very rare opportunity to be able to expand our understanding of the American past. It just allows a different sort of tactile experience that brings people closer to the history of slavery.
Studying slavery just reminds me who we are and what we are as Americans. As an artist, I felt like I was empowering myself with all of this information that we don't like to consider, that literally we are all on top of right now. We all stand on the shoulders of this history.
As an artist right now that is also a historian, I think that it's my role, and not just me alone, to look at what's missing in history and use my talents as a creative to make those moments in history that I know from my research are not adequately represented. This is a moment that artists and creatives should really embrace and say, let's run with it and actually tell the story as it's supposed to be told and not wait for somebody else to do it.
Let's go to the archives. Let's go to the historical societies. Let's dig up these stories that have never reached history books, that have never been put on museum websites or never been filmed before. And let's tell those stories. There's all kinds of stories and testimonies about enslaved people that have not been told.